All right, cool. So yeah, welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday afternoon. So any questions up to here? All right, let's play around with the URL class. So let me fire up Eclipse. And we started playing with this yesterday. We made a URL from astronomy picture of the day, and then we used the open stream to get an input stream, and we used that to construct a scanner, and then we read from the scanner and we saw the source code for a web page. And so let's expand on that. So we'll call this browser 233 because it sounds mysterious. And let's make this a GUI, so we'll put in a J-frame. And I'm going to stylize this page a little bit, so I'm going to do an absolute layout on here. And I'm going to make this frame bigger, and I'm going to drop a couple of containers inside here. So the first thing I'm going to drop in is a scroll pane. So a scroll pane is kind of like a panel in that it can hold other components, but it will also let us augment our display with scroll bars. So we'll drop our pane in here, and if what we try to display in here is too large, it will add scroll bars for us, which will let us move around our view. And we're not going to do any coding inside this scroll pane. We're not going to write any methods or anything. It's just going to kind of be there and work for us. After it's done crashing Eclipse. Well, that worked. Alright, so that's a good trick. When Eclipse hangs up, just demaximize your window and then remaximize it. That seemed to actually work. Alright, so I'm going to put my scroll pane in here, and then inside that I'm going to put an edit pane. Okay, so an edit pane, JEditorPane is going to sit here, and I'm going to this is another thing that can hold components, but it has a particularly useful method for us called setPage. And setPage will accept a URL, and it will set the current URL page being displayed. Blah 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 blah. We can read all of this, but we're not going to. We're just going to do this, and it's going to do something fantastic for us. So let me pop a button in here. I'll put a button at the top. I guess I should make this a little smaller. Alright, and I go for code. I was having really bad luck with Window Builder this morning. So I'm going to put my scroll pane, I'm just going to move it down a little bit. I'll put it at like, 50 in the Y direction. And then I can put my button down here. And I'm going to call this button Go. And let's write some code for what happens when we click the Go button. So I'm going to make a URL called page. So and I'll construct that off of a string called starting page. So let me declare some things up here. So that's the page we're displaying. So there's a variable called starting page, which is, guess what, it's our starting page. I'll import my URL class. And when I click the button, I will construct a URL from the starting page. I'll put this in the try-catch block, because if it can't load that page, it'll throw a malformed URL exception. Alright, so what do we got so far? We've got a Go button, which will construct a page, right? Construct a URL, and then I'm going to take my editor pane, and I'm going to say set page. I'm going to use that URL object. So let's run this. And if I click the Go button, I get my astronomy picture of the day. And it's sitting right there. Now I can't click on anything, and I don't think I set my scroll pane up because my scroll, I'm not scrollable here. But this is taking that HTML that we looked at yesterday, right? So it's taking this stuff and it's rendering it into, you know, the actual web page that we would like to see, with a picture here and different fonts and so on and so forth. So let's figure out why I don't have a scroll pane in here. There's my scroll pane. And I thought I dropped an editor pane in here. I did. Alright, let me try this again. Let me get rid of all of that. Let me drop in my JScrollpane. Let me make it big. And then let me drop my editor pane inside here. And this should still be set up. So our editor pane is called JEditorPane. And that's declared right down here. So I'm just going to do the usual thing we do, which is declare these things in the beginning of the class. So we'll display our web page in there. Alright, so now I've got my web page displayed, and I have scroll bars so that I can move around. So somewhere in between crashing Window Builder earlier, I inadvertently got my content pane, my editor pane in the wrong place. So we went back and fixed that. Alright, while I'm in here, let's make an exit button, because hitting that X bar is kind of a drag. So let's make something called exit. And what should we do when we exit? I'm just going to call system.exit. And that's going to shut down the whole shebang. So I can load up my page here, and I can scroll around and stuff, and then I can just exit to kick out of there. Alright, so what's next? Well, you know, the problem is that we're not responding to these links, right? We can't click on them. It's all just kind of text. And we haven't done much, right? We basically created a page, and then we said JEditorPane set page. Alright? We only need to do one more thing to make those links things that are actually acting like links. So our JEditorPane we have to make it non-editable. And I don't know if that's in these fields. Okay, some kinds of content may provide hyperlink support by generating hyperlink events. The HTML editor kit will generate hyperlink events if the JEditorPane is not editable. JEditorPane set editable false has been called. Okay, so if we want to make links possible, we need to make it non-editable. That's just what it does. So we've set that up in here. Let's go ahead and run our code. Let's click the Go button. And now when I bring my mouse over these links, my arrow changes to a little hand. Same thing when I bring it over the picture, and so on and so forth. So it's at least noticing these things are different. But clicking on them doesn't do anything except, you know, highlight text and so on as usual. But it's seeing those. Okay, so now we can go back to the design window, and we can go into our editor pane, and we can right click, add event handler, and let's add a hyperlink event called hyperlink update. And let's just put a print message in here. And this is called with an argument arg0. So let's just take a look at the value of that. So we'll run our code, we'll say go. we'll come down here to a hyperlink, and when I point at the hyperlink, that code got called. It says hyperlink update has happened, and when I moved away, it also gave me a message saying that, you know, hyperlink update has happened. And when I click on it, I'll also get a message saying that this has happened. So hyperlink listener gets called when we point at a link, when we stop pointing at a link, or when we click on a link. And there will be subtle differences inside here. So subtle we can't even see them. Flags is 296. Red, green, blue is the color. That's all the same. Editable is false. Top left, right, bottom right are the same. So we're not seeing a lot of differences in those. But remember, this is just how, you know, arg0's toString method happens to be set up, right? So what is this arg0? It's a hyperlink event. So let's look at a hyperlink event a little closer. And it has a few methods available. We can say get URL to get the URL that the link refers to. That's going to be cool. And we can also say get event type. Okay, so let's try get URL first. So instead of doing all of this stuff, let's just print out the URL of that page, that link. So discover the cosmos, there's the URL it refers to. Here's a picture, there's the JPEG it refers to. Here's the image owner, there's the web page. Here's the image, here's something on the human eye, here's the familiar Orion Nebula, and so on and so forth. So we can tap into these links, right, and find the URL using this get URL method. We can also look at event type, okay, or we can get the description of the link as a string and so on. So let's look at get event type. Okay, that tells us what type of event, presumably either moving over a link, moving away from a link, or clicking on the link. And it returns an object of type hyperlink event.event type. And hyperlink.event type has 3 values: activated, entered, and exited. So let's see what happens if we just pay attention to the activated type events. So if arg0 dot get event type equals hyperlink event dot event type dot activated. That was a click. All right. Still not a lot of code in here, right? We hit the go button, we create a page from a URL, set the editor pane to be non-editable, set the set page with the page URL, and when we go over a link and we click on it, we'll come into this method, we'll check the event type, and if it's an activated, meaning we clicked, we'll just print out the URL using get URL. Okay, and all the rest of this code was made for us by Window Builder. But now we got some stuff happening, right? So I'll say go, I'll come over here, and nothing happens when I hover, but if I click on this, I get a message from my code saying click, and there's a URL for a web page. And if I come over here to the picture and I click, there's another URL. And if I come over here and I click, and so on. And you know, if I just click in the middle where there's not a link, nothing happens. So we've got the beginnings of a web browser here, right? We have the ability to display a page and to run code when a link is clicked, and to exit, of course. Okay, well, how did we make our original page accessible? We said EditorPane.setPage, and we gave it a URL. Well, here we've got a URL. If we want to actually go to that page, all we got to do is one thing. Right, that's all it's going to take. Call the getURL method from the argument. Use that as an argument to the setPage method in the EditorPane object, which is a JEditorPane class. Throw it inside a try-catch, as usual. And bingo, we've got a web browser. That's a cool picture. That's pretty cool. So whatever I clicked on was something that is not HTML. It's some other kind of file, like maybe, you know, it was a sound file or a video or something. And this EditorPane does not know how to render that, so it's just displaying the contents of that file. This is the difference between, you know, using Chrome or Firefox versus using this. So that's kind of cool. I'm curious what that was. I don't think I can remember the links that I used to get there. All right, so we've got, you know, a rudimentary web browser here. There's Bernard's loop. All right, so this is good so far. So what's the button that I'm missing from my browser here? If you could add one button, what would it be? Yeah, backward and forward arrows, right? So I got to that page where I was looking at what looked like gibberish, and I wanted to go back and see what that link was, but I don't have a back button. So let's wire together a back button. Okay, so I'll make a button, and I'll pop it down here, and I'll say back. This is like horrible aesthetics I'm doing here. Alright, so what should we do when we go back? Well, we should display the previous page. So we need to somehow remember what the last URL was that we want to display. So here's the sort of setup. We're displaying page 1, and it's got some links on it, and somewhere over here is a link to, you know, page 5, and we're going to click on that, and we're going to display page 5. And somewhere over here, you know, is a link to page 3, so we're going to click on that, and it's going to display page 3. And if we hit the back button, we want to go back and display page 5, the last page we displayed. And if we hit the back button again, we want to go back to the page before that. But if we go back to page 5 and then we click on this link, which is page 7, we want to come over here and display page 7. If we hit the back arrow, we should go back to page 5, and then if we hit the arrow again, we should go back to page 1. So we need to go back to the most recent page that we were looking at before we follow the hyperlink. But we don't want to just save it in a variable called previous page, because we might have pages before that that we need to remember. So what's a good data structure we can use to remember these things in reverse order and get back to them later on? So CSE 222 question. True. So yeah, so yes, that's a good answer. The linked list is what we want to use, but what we're really looking for here is something like a stack, right? Last in, first out. So the last thing that you click is the first page you're going to go back to, right? But it turns out in Java, the easiest way to implement a stack is to use a linked list, right? So you're right, let's use a linked list. And if you remember how linked lists work, they can be stacks, they can be queues, they can be linked lists, they can be arrays. So a couple of methods we're going to want to know about. We can say add, which will add to the end of the list. Okay, so add is a good method. And we can say remove last, which removes from the end of the list. So add and remove last together will make a nice stack for us. We could also add in the beginning and remove from the beginning if we want. But let's do add and remove last. And that'll implement our stack. Okay, so when we're ready to follow a link, what we want to do is we want to take the current page and put it onto the stack. So before we follow this link, let's save the current page on the stack. Alright, well, if we go back to our JEditorPane, it has a method called getPage. It returns a URL, which is the current URL being displayed. Alright, so let's make a linked list. And let's make a linked list of URLs. So we'll import the linked list class. And I'll make a list called history, which is a linked list of URLs. I don't need to know what a URL looks like. It's some kind of class. It's built in. It's got all kinds of stuff in it. I don't need to worry about that. All I need to do is when I construct my list, use this generic specifier to say I want it to be a linked list of URLs. And now the things that I add and remove to and from that list will be objects of type URL. Which means down here where I say before we follow this link, let's save the current page on the stack, I'm going to say history.add editorpane.getPage. Okay, editorpane is where I'm displaying the web page. GetPage will give me the URL of the current page, and I will use that as an argument to the add method for this linked list of URLs called history. Right? This one line is dynamite. There's so much going on here. Right? I'm finding this, I'm getting this whole URL object corresponding to the current page. I'm putting that to the end of a linked list. I'll go ahead and I'll go on to the page that I get by following the link. And now our back button, no, don't crash. Oh man, I broke my window builder. And give it a minute, see if it comes out. All right, while we're waiting for that to either crash or resolve itself, quick mention I wanted to make. There's emails going around about a protest occurring tomorrow called Shut Down STEM, and people are asking faculty and researchers and students and administrators associated with STEM to boycott all of their regular activities as a show of unity and protest against racial injustice and things that have been going on for a long time, but in particular more recently, a lot of the things that we're seeing happen. I absolutely support racial equality. I absolutely support whatever we can do to try to correct all of the inequity and inequality. But I am planning on teaching class tomorrow, and I am planning on having office hours tomorrow, because I also believe that education can be an important component in empowering people to be able to affect change for the benefit of all. So I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody who is planning to take part in this, and if you don't want to come to class, that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to go over anything that will be on the exam, okay? I'll be going over Android development, maybe looking at some source code. It won't be on the exam, and it'll be recorded and available in the class video. So if you choose not to participate in STEM activities tomorrow, you won't miss anything that'll affect your grade. But I will be teaching, and I'll be in regular office hours as usual. All right, and I don't think Eclipse is going to come out of its brain lock, so we will go back in. I did not save that last change, but that's not a problem. So let's see. We made our linked list. We followed the hyperlink. And we need to add it to the linked list. So history.add EditorPane.getPage. All right, do I have a back button? I do. So EditorPane.setPage. And what should we set the page to? Let's go back and look at our linked list. Actually, we're adding things to the end, so we want the last thing from the linked list. If we were adding the beginning, then yeah, we'd want the first element from the history list. But we're adding, which, if we just say add, it appends it to the end of the list. And so we're going to retrieve and remove the last element of the list. So remove last. And what I wanted to see is if it actually returns that element, which it does. And yes, we could also do the size method. We could say size to see how many things are in the list, and then use that with the get method and say get that element, the element at that index, -1. So that would be another way to do it. So I'm just going to do remove last. Which has two effects, right? The first effect is it removes the thing from the end of the list, so it pops it off the stack, which prepares us for the next time we hit the back button. But then it also returns the thing that was popped off the stack, and we can use that as an argument to set page. So if that page is not available, it'll throw an exception, so we'll catch that. And so now if we run this, we can say go. We can say discover the cosmos. We can look at the lively center. We can look at European Space Agency. Maybe. All right. And now if I hit the back button, I go back to the previous page. And I can go back again, and I can hit a different page to go forward. And I can go back again and come over to the halo of cat's eye. That's cool. And I can go back, and I can go back to my original page. So there's a basic back button, right? And if I wanted to be able to go forward, right, instead of removing those things from the stack, I could simply back up. So I could put these things into an array. I could limit it to, 500 pages or something. And the back button would simply change an index, and I would pull things off at that index and use that to be the URL I load in the editor pane. And then the forward button would simply increment the index, and if there was something in our history array at that location, I would load that into the editor pane. And right now, when I hit the back button, all it's going to do is remove the last thing in the linked list and load that into the page. And if I try to go back before the first page, I'm going to get an exception. In particular, I'm going to try to load a null. Well, I'm trying to remove something from the stack and it doesn't exist. So my linked list class right here at line 109, that's where I'm getting the exception, is the remove last. Right, so before I would do this, I would check to see if there was anything in the list, and if the list was empty, if the size argument returned 0, I could gray out that back button, for example. I could disable it, and then I could re-enable it the first time we push something on. So when you have something like Java or some other object-oriented language, Python, whatever, you have these classes that have all this capability inside, and to put those together into a large-scale system can be kind of like just putting building blocks together, like your favorite Tinker Toys or Legos, and they do all the hard work for us, and we just kind of get to choose how do we want to put them together, in what way, in what order, how do we want them to interact, and so on and so forth, and to piece something together, like a rudimentary web browser, really not hard. We could put a URL bar down here, just a text field, and if you type in that and you hit enter or you hit the load button, we would just take that string, we would use it to construct a URL, and we would load that into the editor pane, push it onto the linked list for the history, and now we can type things into the URL bar like we do in a regular browser. All right, so that's just an example of some more powerful classes, scroll panes, editor panes, and URL. So tomorrow I want to play around with Android. I just want to look at Android as a sort of parallel to what we've done with Window Builder and Swing. And if people are interested in making Android apps, this would be a good chance to go over some of that. All right, I'll be in office hours from 3 to 4 today. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Thanks.